All right, good morning, everyone. Very happy to see so many faces here today. Welcome to this, in my opinion, definitely exciting topic: the art and science of open-ended feedback analysis in the AI era. Why do I see myself as qualified to hopefully not bore but entertain you for the next 20-25 minutes? I'm a techie by background. Originally, I'm a computer scientist, but founded Kaplena in 2018. So I spent Kaplena as a solution for feedback analysis. So I actually spent most of my career with open-ends. And it's a great topic, which I will bring you a bit closer in the next 20 minutes. Let's start with an opening question. What do you think? How do open-ends impact opinions on migration? Two wildly different topics, you would think. But there was an interesting study last year where they surveyed people in Poland and asked them about their opinions on migration and ideas for solutions with open-ends, but also with closed questions. And it turned out that with open-ends, people would not only answer in richer responses, but also they would be more positive towards migration. So quite interesting how the way you ask questions can actually influence the result. Now, does this mean you can improve your NPS just by switching to open-ends? Not quite as easy, but it's a thing to keep in mind. With that, let's get started with a couple of reasons to use open-ends, and I think for many of you this is repetition, so I'm going to go through this one fast. First of all, you get less bias. It's top of mind. It's the true opinion of the customer, not forced into a specific category. Second of all, you have less questionnaire fatigue. Now, with questionnaire fatigue, I don't mean survey fatigue in general. I mean the fatigue that sets in once you have already decided to do a specific survey. And of course, this depends on the specific person when this sets in. For me personally, I can say that I will, when a questionnaire is less than 5 questions, I will most probably complete it. If it's between 5 and 10, I will partly complete it. If a questionnaire is more than 10 questions, there is a very, very small chance that I will go through the end. And a third point is coverage. So with an open end, you can cover a huge plethora of topics with one specific question, which you would have to ask dozens or even hundreds of questions with closed questions instead. There is one more additional point which someone pointed out to me yesterday in a conversation, and that's with open ends, it's easier to spot bad data. So these automated survey takers, they are easier to spot with open-ended answers that you can then filter out than if you only have multiple choice, which is harder to detect any fakes in there. But let's have a bit a deeper look at the coverage point, just to make an illustration here on what I mean. So let's assume the context of airline feedback. This is the examples I'm going to give today. And let's think about what kind of topics might come up in airline feedback. There might be things about pricing, topics about airline perception in general. Probably a lot of different things come up with relation to onboard service, from the entertainment system, the friendliness of cabin crew. Then you have health and hygiene, customer service, etc., etc., etc. This is not even a complete topic collection, just an excerpt from it, but you see the huge variety of things that we can cover with one single open-ended question. Luckily, I'm not the only one that's a fanboy of open-ends. We did a survey recently asking 50 research buyers, do you plan to use more open-ended questions going forward? It was done last year, so it's that's why 25 was still the future. And actually, 2/3 of the people said that they would expect an increase of open-ends. About 30% said they would keep it at the same levels, and not a single person said that they would plan on decrease the use of open-ends. What are the fraction of studies that open-ends are employed? For about half of our respondents, they would use them in all their surveys, with another 40% using them in the majority of cases. So very widespread already. Of course, we might be a bit biased with the kinds of clients and companies that we interact, but nevertheless a very clear signal overall. But one question needs to be asked. In this era where we have so many more data sources than we used to have, are open ends still relevant? Are they still the future? Let's have a look at a couple of different sources that we might want to analyze. We have our classic ad hoc surveys, transactional feedback. We also have the cool kids on the block like voice surveys, behavioral data, video surveys, online reviews, generative responses. What does that mean for open ends? Well, if you look at it, actually all but behavioral data will produce open ends in their for analysis, because even if you do voice surveys, if you do video surveys, if you go beyond maybe eye tracking, which you can do in video surveys, if you want to analyze the content, it's always going to result in transcribed open data. So it's only going to get more going forward. But also with open ends, also of a good thing, there can be too much at some point. So we did an analysis of about 100,000 projects that we have on our platform and looked at the ratio of empty answers, so the response rate of open ends, depending on how many open ends were asked in the survey. Now, the absolute value is not too relevant. This is an average over a huge number, and it, of course, depends heavily on the industry, etc. But the trend is quite interesting. So you can see that it's a nonlinear trend, and after 5 or 6 open ends, there is a dramatic increase in the drop-off rate. So probably you should stay below that. Which takes me to a couple of recommendations, practical tips on how to make the most out of your open ends. These tips come from Andre. Those of you that have had to do with us already probably know him. He's a great guy and our customer success lead, very experienced market researcher from the industry. So the first tip is ask for specific experiences. Don't ask, what do you think about our brand? What do you think about our airline? Ask, how was your experience on the last flight you took? The second one, ask for an open end and a rating question. Starting with a rating question followed by an open end is such a powerful combination already. It allows you to make a quantification on the number. It allows you to make a quantification on which topics were mentioned how often. And as a third element, you get to do things like a driver analysis, because the most mentioned topic doesn't necessarily need to be the topic that drives your NPS the most. And with this simple combination, you can actually get a lot of insights already. Yeah, probably the same thing. Don't ask more than 10 questions. I think I've covered that point, or at least you need to have a very good reason if you want to ask more than 10 questions. And second point, don't split positive and negative questions. What do I mean by that? It is very common still that people ask likes and dislikes separately. There are two issues with that. First of all, the respondents won't follow your instructions. We see that again and again, that you have a significant amount of people that put negative elements into the positive and vice versa, maybe 10%, maybe 20, maybe 30. And you will lose that information when you separate that. And the second point is it makes analyses much more complicated, because you have to analyze them separately and bring them together again. With modern sentiment analysis tool, you can have it in one question, and the analysis is simpler and more complete in the end. Right, so now that you have followed these tips, you hopefully have the great, insightful data that really changes the needle for your businesses. And you'll get gems like this one. Zachary shared with us that he entered the plane normally, but left with a sore bum. So these are the kind of gems that we're looking for. But if we look at the practice, unfortunately, it more often looks like this, these walls of text that we are confronted with and that we should now make sense of. So let's get a bit into the analysis part. How do we make sense of this kind of data? Right, maybe one more point before getting into the analysis. This is actually the most common cause to not employ more open ends. So analysis, effort, time constraints, high cost, which are actually all kind of the same thing. They all go into the same direction. It's just too much effort to analyze these open ends. This is the main reason people are still reluctant to use them in some cases. Let's get into the analyses. There are 4 steps in our process that we follow to make use of open-ended data. First of all, we want to identify the topics that we actually want to track and quantify. Second point, we do the topic assignment and hopefully some quality assurance on the way. Third, there comes dashboarding and reporting. And finally, we hopefully take action based on these insights. And if this is a continuous tracker, then this is a cycle, so this shouldn't be a one-off process, but a continuous repeating process. And I want to go a bit more into the first 2 elements here, how this works nowadays, what the challenges are, even in the AI era. So starting with the topic identification, well, hopefully, I really don't need to make the case for AI in general. You should use AI. I think that's common sense by now to let you uncover these deeper insights more quickly. But it's not as simple as just throwing it into an LLM. How do we get to this topic collection, which is nicely structured, which is well-defined from this raw data that we saw before? And yes, of course, the answer is in partly LLMs, but it doesn't stop there. And I want to make an example here why it's not that simple. So we took a couple of these reviews that you saw before, these airline reviews, I think about 100 pieces, and threw them into ChatGPT, asked it to generate topics for us that are relevant. And I selected everything that was related to policies and fees here to give a bit a better subset and overview. So the first experiment I did, the first run, it returned these 3 topics: ticket changes, refunds, and vouchers. Then I queried it again with the same input. The second time it returned these topics. Some are more or less the same, refunds, refund policies. Some are new, like the excess baggage fees. And then I did it again in a third run, and in the third run it returned even more topics, and it was also quite verbose in the way it returned those topics. What does it mean? Well, yes, the basis to get to these topics should be LLMs, and it's a great starting point, but just throwing it in and taking whatever you get out is probably not the way to go. You need to do some more refinement afterwards. And our approach here is that we first let them be generated by the LLM, then we do some very classical statistic validation, reduction of this huge raw bucket of potential topics to see which ones are relevant, which ones are actually well separated and not overlapping, and which ones also occur enough times that they justify being a topic on their own. And finally, very important in our opinion, it shouldn't be a black box, but the user should be given the choice and presented these as a suggestion and should be able to influence which ones they actually want to keep and potentially add their own ones, modify the existing ones. One more step we're adding currently, which will be available in the next couple of weeks, is that you can do this modification and approval process also through a prompt, that you can change the way the topics are generated also through a prompt. That is something which is currently in the works. Right, so now I have this topic collection, and then I will use AI to do the topic assignment. The big question there is, can I trust the results? Can I trust these results and really give the insights in the end, give suggestions to my management maybe on what to do based on these AI insights? And our approach here, so that you're able to hopefully say yes, is that we have 3 pillars to ensure the quality of the AI. The first one is that we compute a score, a quality score. It's the F1 score for the more technical folks among you, which computes how well did the AI understand the task and how good is the overlap between what you did and or you would do and the AI does. The second point is that you can nudge the AI. You can teach it by reviewing a couple of rows and pushing it in the right direction so that you can make sure it does what you actually want it to do. And the final element is transparency. You can look at single verbatims, not just aggregate numbers, to see if the quality is what you would expect it to be. And this is something we still recommend to everyone, to take a qualitative sample of the data, to have a look at a couple of sample rows yourself, just to see if it makes sense. So, right, with this, we now hopefully have a perfect analysis, a perfect topic collection, and high quality results. And I want to take a step back and look a bit what kind of trends are there that are in this area which will keep us busy in the next years and which we should not miss if we're in this area of open-ended or customer feedback in general. And I want to do that with the help of the Gartner hype cycle. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. It often starts with some kind of technology trigger, some new technology which triggers a peak of inflated expectations, followed by the trough of delusionment, and hopefully sometime then a plateau of productivity. My small addition here is a graveyard of ideas, which I do think is where a lot of the ideas end up. And I want to take 3 specific technologies and place them on this cycle here that I think we should keep our eyes on. The first one is chatbots or active listening. Now, what I mean by this are these kind of chatbots that you have that interact with the respondees. So where you ask follow-up questions, for example, or you ask it to give more detailed responses based on what they initially said. And these kind of active listening solutions have been touted already for a couple of years. If you have been to these conferences, you have heard probably of them already 3 or 4 years ago. I think they were still a bit immature at that point, but I do think they tend to become really productive now. And I think it's a technology that will find its place in productive solutions to make sure that we gain the most insightful responses from our respondents. A second trend, very new, it has appeared last year in many conferences, are generative responses. So the simplest form is just asking ChatGPT instead of asking your customers, your target market. More sophisticated solutions might only use it for boosting purposes. So you try to extend underrepresented samples or hard to sample populations, but you have some base true data already. Now, this is currently at the peak of the hype. I personally am yet to be convinced if this will truly deliver the kind of quality that we are looking for, but it's definitely a technology that we should keep our eyes on. And finally, conversational insights. So again, kind of chatbots, but at the other end of the spectrum where we have the data already, and we use chatbots to query the results. And here I am very bullish on this technology, and we have also developed a solution in-house here already. And I want to get to the end of the presentation by showing what our vision here is for these kind of solutions. So yes, it's a chatbot interface, again, based on this, oops, it should look like that. You can come to our booth and have a live presentation. I think that works better than a canned video. That seems to be a challenge. Let me explain nevertheless quickly why I'm so excited about these kind of solutions. It's a chatbot interface that combines quantitative and qualitative elements. So it still requires this solid quantification in order to be able to deliver the numbers inside it, but it also adds this qualitative aspect. Now, is it a completely new kind of analysis that wasn't possible before? No, it's not. It's still the same kind of analysis with a qualitative angle, but there is one huge difference, and that is that you can get your answer within potentially 10, 20 seconds, where before, even if you had a great tool, it might take you 10 minutes, 15 minutes to create a chart which generates the same kind of answer. And the difference between 20 seconds and 10 minutes is that you will follow your train of thought for much longer. It makes it much easier to go deeper and follow your train of thought, do more follow-up questions than you would do if you had to create every single chart yourself. And that's why I think it's a very exciting technology for researchers to be able to go beyond what we did until now. And with that, I'm getting to the end of my presentation. I do hope you could take some things with you, and if you would like to have a look at this conversational insights in a working environment, then please visit our booth downstairs. We'd be very happy to show you some solutions there. And if you would like to have the presentation as a PDF, you're also very welcome to scan this QR code and download it from there. With that, thank you so much for your attention. And yeah, happy to answer any questions that might still be around now. Yes, you'll just get a microphone.
So I'm super curious about your conversational insights interface. I think it's a big trend, but it's always quite risky. It's important to avoid hallucinations in the responses. So what's your specific approach here?
Absolutely, that's a huge challenge. We try to teach these LLMs not to compute any numbers by themselves. So our approach is really that all the numbers that it presents should come from the engine, the quantification that we did before already. The one where I mentioned all the steps involved that you take to make sure this quantification is reliable. And we try to force the LLM not to produce any numbers by itself, but to query. It's basically a translation engine. It takes human query and translates it in a structured database query in the end, where the numbers it gets back are reliable. That's how we try to make it such that to minimize hallucinations. Of course, in the qualitative text, there you can never be 100% sure, but at least we can say the numbers that it presents, those have hand and feet, if we say it in German.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Can you use all languages, or is there a limitation?
We support something like 35 languages natively and 100 plus through translation. So we have Google Translate and DeepL integrated. You can choose whichever you want. And with DeepL has a bit fewer, but anecdotally speaking, I would say the quality is still a bit higher. But with Google Translate, you can also, you have, I think even 180 or something by now. More languages than I know. All right, so if there are no more questions, then thanks again and enjoy your day.